Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Market research has played a big role in helping an organisation build successful brands. That's why today we're talking about brand density, why it matters, and how it can be measured. This is Michael Howard, the Head of Marketing at Infotools. I'm your host for this instalment of Now That's Significant, a Market Research Podcast. We're joined by Kendra Speed, Director of Consumer Market Research at LinkedIn, working closely with product marketing, brand and product leaders to deliver consumer and market insight that helps guide strategic decision making. Under her leadership of the global market research team, she's dedicated to understanding of consumer and premium business lines at LinkedIn. Welcome to the show, Kendra.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today.
You're welcome. So, Kendra, what's the most important thing you're going to share with us today?
So the most important thing I'm going to share is I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we at LinkedIn have started to look at brand density and leverage it as we think about our traditional ways of tracking the strength of our brands, and talk a little bit about some of the innovations we put into place recently.
No, sure. So, can you tell us a little bit about your experience, what it's been with measuring brand strength in the context, I guess, of the broader marketplace? Maybe the challenges that you've seen organizations face.
Sure. When I think about, kind of my history in tracking brands, I think all the way back to starting a career at this point 20 years ago at Procter and Gamble, and working to understand hair care brands, so Pantene and Head and Shoulders and herbal essences, and really being able to understand the performance of those brands within the broader hair care category, and looking at this battery of brand attributes that looked at both functional and emotional components, and really being able to say, okay, how is each brand doing on what they said they want to be doing? Where are the white space opportunities? How do they differentiate themselves from each other? And then what are some of the aspirations that the brand should have? So that would be kind of my earliest times of working with that. And to be quite honest, what I found in the years that have followed since is that it is a challenging world as we think about tracking brands. One is in being able to take something that likely doesn't shift much from wave to wave and trying to find ways to influence business strategy with this really rich insight, but turning it from something that seems to be a little bit of a dull or head nod into something that internal teams can really grasp onto, buy into, and then act upon within their strategies.
Yeah, cool. So you mentioned brand density. What exactly is it, and why does, I guess, you at LinkedIn feel that it's an important thing to measure over the various other kinds of tools or frameworks that a marketer can use?
Sure. When you think about brand density, it really speaks to the strength of your brand. So one is, as you think about like, what are all of those associations that your brand has? And then going a step further to say, and what is the interrelationship between all of those associations? Ideally, we want our brands to be, have lots of great associations with things that matter in the category, and our degree of being able to ensure that there's a relationship between those associations just follows the natural flow of consumers as they think about our brands in the broader context of everything else that's going through their minds.
Yeah, nice. So interesting. You're a market researcher, and you have been for, as you said, for 20 years or so. What role has research played in the formation of brand density?
Yeah, so great question. What I will say is, on a global scale, there definitely have been teams of individuals who have been looking at brand density for years. So this is by no means something that's new, that LinkedIn is just bringing new to the market. What I will say is market research has been core to this, right? It's really relies on taking things that we have traditionally done and understanding associations, and then taking a step further and thinking about what those relationships are. If you think about some of the work that's been done, it really comes down to, research that's been done that shows that, brand density, when you're deriving it from actual open-ended questions, correlates very highly with market share. And then also showing that these open-end associations direct from consumers carry so much more weight as you think about correlation with market share than what we see from these more static battery of attributes and just asking people to go through and rate them, understanding at some point in time, we're probably running into a degree of fatigue.
Yes, and we don't want that, do we?
No, we don't.
Open ends, I take it as quite a pillar of brand density. What are some of the reasons you've chosen to use that particular methodology or approach
One, it really comes from the overall relationship that we see here. So we know that these open ends provide a degree of richness to not only understand the independent attributes and how they are associated with your brand, but also being able to see what are those relationships that come up when we're thinking about that. It's not just that your brand is professional, but it also comes up in the same vein of professional and innovative. What might we do differently with that insight versus just knowing each one on its own? When we think about the open-ended question that we really lean on here, the great thing is it's something that typically shows up in most of our brand tracking studies anyway. It really comes to what comes to mind when you think about brand A, brand X. So it's a very general, open-ended question that allows consumers to respond in their words, not in ours.
No, true. And there's all sorts of things, associations, etc., that you can glean from those, isn't there? Rather than being forced through a particular journey. So
definitely.
So over the past year, LinkedIn has experimented with different approaches to measuring brand density. Can you describe how you've leveraged technology to innovate your approach?
Definitely. So the first thing is we started with really just saying, let's get a really good lay of the land in understanding category associations. So this is where the first entry point was with saying, hey, we definitely could have a study that would allow us to get all of these different category associations and understand the interrelationships. However, it might be easier and have the ability to cast a broader net by leveraging a tool such as ChatGPT. And that's exactly what we did. So if you think about it, it's a multiple step process of first just going in, ensuring that we kind of iterate on the prompt in the beginning to be able to understand within the marketplace, what are those associations that are showing up for a given category. And in that prompt, it might be, among professionals, how do they think about the category of social media apps, something like that. And then being able to pull out all of that insight, going through that list and being able to group together different instances to be able to understand that, going through and iterating that several times, understanding we could get different responses back. From there, being able to really group together these associations into just some pretty discrete themes that we can just be able to better manage it. And then from that, be able to really rank based upon the number of times things are mentioned to really be able to understand, okay, which are coming up more often versus not. And then the final piece here is also doing the assessment to understand how often are these things mentioned together. So it sounds kind of easy, but it definitely is this piece of, in partnership with Quantum, who we worked with on this, and Marco in leading that charge, was going through this again and again. The other great thing is we do have some other tools. So it's looking back at our traditional brand trackers and saying, like, is this making sense given what we already know about the category? But what we've seen is as we have refined that process, it gets quicker and quicker for us to do, and also allows us just this broader context as we think about really getting feedback from the market.
Yeah, how does it work then between the two, the traditional trackers and then the density side of things?
Yeah, so what I will say is that's the category in. So if we thought about these as like, two circles. So first we want to understand everything in the category realm. Really, when we think about the overall kind of like brand associations, as you might be able to appreciate, that's not something that we're necessarily going to go out to the marketplace because there might not be things that we want to feed it from a prompting standpoint. So we are able to leverage our brand tracker and be able to understand, like, okay, what are those key associations that are popping up? And what is the degree of overlap with those things that really are popping in the marketplace? What this allows us to see is, what are our strengths and the things that are most important in the category? And then also being able to say, are there any opportunities that we have that really aren't bubbling up to the top in a place of where we might be able to play?
Yeah, nice. So, I mean, you make the approach sound quite straightforward, but I imagine it can be have its fair share of complexity. So, what advice would you give, tips, I guess, to give teams who want to seek this technique applied in their business?
Yeah, well, for me, like the first word that comes to mind, and I will say it 3 times, is iterate, iterate, iterate. This is not one of those things that you can just go and say, like, hey, I'm going to hop on ChatGPT. I'm going to get back, one listing and we're good to go. We're going to run with that. There's really this art and science as well as this degree of experimentation. So first going in with this mindset of, hey, there will be some trial and error. Trial and error first coming in as you think about getting the prompts right. You want to structure your prompt in such a way that it's reflective of both your category, but then also the consumer base of which you're interested in. So there's a lot of time that comes into that. The other piece is even just getting and working the muscle of the somewhat manual piece of this, where you still need to go in and go through and look at the categorizations, even as you're doing the iteration. So it's like having this willingness and tolerance for saying, like, there will be a bit of like rolling up our sleeves and being able to go in there and understand that. The other piece is really great partners. So the work that we've done internally under the leadership of Ro, as well as in partnership with Quantum, we couldn't have done it without Quantum and years of research that they've done, first in traditional methods, and then also having this lean in attitude to being able to partner with us to do the experimentation. So I would say partner well and be prepared to iterate.
Yeah. So you talked about the technology side of things, but you also mentioned the human aspects as well, how you had that QA in there, and obviously that's still a big part of what you're doing as well, ensuring there's that human oversight.
Definitely. Oh, that's a great point. As I think about the use of any technology, and then also with, the ramp up that we're seeing, the high acceleration that we're seeing in things such as AI, that is not a crutch or a substitute for a lot of the human aspect of this. So it's the judgment in ensuring that, yes, we have the right questions in there. But then it's also in, yes, the oversight, looking in at key points to make sure that what we're getting out is actually making sense. So I think about a lot this example as one of many of how we're able to take and translate traditional ways of doing things, leveraging newer tools to make it even that much more impactful for the business. So we're not yet today at this place of departure, like where we're saying we're shelving all tracking studies. We're going to go all out with using ChatGPT to be able to do our sensing of our brand strength. It really is the marriage or the merger of the two.
Yes, I mean, one of the best examples of technology, I guess you could think is accountants with the invention of spreadsheets and whatnot. You would have thought, they're going to be done away with, but people still go to accountants for their expertise and their advice. Market researchers are the same. Like there's always going to be that need for people who know how to deal with the data, how to apply it wisely and well with the proper frameworks, etc. as well. So I think we're safe.
I do. I mean, I think I kind of grew up with entrepreneur parents who worked in technology. And so I liken it to, as you move from legacy systems and you move from legacy technology, there's still going to have to be people around that understand, like, what is the manual way of how we got to these answers? What is the process? How do we train our models to be able to produce and repeatably in a predictable way produce what we need to be able to impact the business? So by and large, there definitely calls for us to make some adaptation in the way that we approach business questions, but there's so much that we already have in our toolkit to be able to apply to these problems with the use of technology as well.
That's right. We like to think of it as so we're a technology provider as well, particularly on quantitative studies. Like, what's the evidence behind what you're presenting? And yes, you can have generative AI in your business, etc. But if it comes up with an answer, you need to know how it got to that. And you need to be able to look into that supporting data and maybe analyze it yourself or even with another tool, just to understand and know with confidence that that is true and accurate. So again, that's a person being able to go in and test and just explore that there. So.
And as you talk about that, I get excited because I think about, in addition to, brand density is just one example, but thinking about the types of things that we are experimenting with as a market research team in LinkedIn, where we have parts of the team who are really guiding with saying, like, okay, how do we leverage, GAI to help with our work processes? How do we get a jump start on developing an outline for an analysis plan, versus me sitting there and trying to think back to how have I done this all the other times? Is there a really great way to be able to do a prompt and at least get a starting point? So taking, an hour of thinking out of my time so that I can actually start applying and modifying and iterating upon something that I pulled. So all the way from like the rudimentary, how do we do our day-to-day job, but then also thinking about tools that we might have. So of course, I know many companies are using things like, oh, okay, how do we leverage these different models to be able to help us with coding our open ends and being able to synthesize and summarize things? That's one part. The other part is also, developing prompt libraries that can be used within our work processes and as, desk side helpers for researchers within the org And then also all the way to thinking through things like, synthetic data and other ways that might be, more cutting edge as you think about how we actually go and generate data and insights. So for me, it's a really exciting time for market research. I think, whenever we have things that come in the marketplace that feel disruptive, it can always be an opportunity to totally shut down and be like, I don't know what I do from here. Or it can be this prompt to say, what is the opportunity here? How do we adapt? How do we recreate the value that we bring in the organizations that we are in?
Yeah, and it makes life interesting as well.
Definitely, right?
So with AI being top of mind for research organizations or brands, I guess, what do you see as the greatest opportunity for insights professionals that are trying to help their brands to grow and to capture more market share?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest opportunities that we have are to just be somewhat creative in thinking about the the way that we might leverage the technology to adapt our ways of working. So I know a key theme that has been in market research, at least for the last year, is, from a client side standpoint, shrinking budgets and also thinking about the resourcing to do the work. So the degree to which we can apply the technology to be able to be more efficient with our research dollars, also be able to take some of those rudimentary tasks that we do and think about how might we automate, how might we evolve our ways of doing work so that we're spending our time and managing our capacity on those highest impact activities and those places where we add the most value. I really see that as the place that we have opportunity to help ourselves. Specifically, as you think about, just within our bubble, what are things that a market research organization can do for itself with existing dollars?
Yeah. Yeah, I see. I mean, for me with AI, and you've touched on it as well, as that does your thinking for you, the initial thinking, and then you overlay that with your critical thinking. So often, like your first stab at something is okay, but it's only when you come back to it, you really dig into it deeper and you find those gems and those nuggets. So that's a big part of it, just to give you that boost. But it's by no means something that you just go and serve up blindly.
No, I think that's a really great point. I mean, that's the other opportunity that we have because it's understanding, it's a difference from sitting here, and there's different challenges as you think
Yes.
about where you are in your career spectrum, but it's a different story when you're talking about, okay, I've been doing this for about 20 years, so I kind of know what it looks like, and I know when it's right or not. Like, so I know which template to really pick up. But when we think about how do we bring newer researchers into the fold, again, that's not a substitute for some of the foundational principles and things that you just need to know to be able to fully leverage some of these tools. And then also there's a piece of me doing this for 20 years. There's an opportunity that I have to lean into the technology and get smart on how I might bring it into my traditional work processes.
Mm. So, I mean, everyone loves a good case study or seeing something in real life. Are you able to share some work that you've done using brand density and how that's helped to positively impact either your business or a client of yours?
Sure. So one example is, and I'm trying to make it as simple to understand as possible. So, I lead the consumer business, and then we also have lines of business, one of those being talent. So basically thinking about everything on LinkedIn that deals with, get a job, both from a hirer standpoint and job seeker. So, we have brand trackers that go across consumer as well as our lines of business. So we did a multi-step process of being able to understand first, overarching category, what were we seeing with the category association piece, and then being able to do that overlap with the consumer side. And then once being able to, really identify within there, what were those key pieces that we're seeing really pop as a overlap piece for category and consumer. We then overlaid understanding from our talent brand tracker to be able to say, hey, are there opportunities as we think about strengths within our consumer brand that we could really leverage and build out as an opportunity space as we think about talent? So that was kind of like this multi-step process where there was value created along the way, the general category understanding and being able to identify opportunities there, being able to look at the overlap of consumer, and then being able to then overlay talent and consumer and identify where are ways that we can really leverage associations from consumer over into our talent business and vice versa.
Sounds really interesting. And I guess key to a lot of that is actually being able to have access to that data. You mentioned iterate, and iterate. But to do that, you really need to be able to tack and move pretty quickly, I imagine.
Definitely. And so for me, and I alluded to it in the opening. One of the challenges, like when we have a great brand tracking program, we're speaking to, tens of thousands of consumers and business customers. And you're really trying to look for ways to breathe new life into this. So there's like no shortage of data, but it's like, how might you look at this data differently? How might you put the data side by side differently in such a way that drives greater insight, illumination for internal stakeholders to help them in their business decision making? So for me, that's like really the most exciting part. Like, yes, it's great that we're leveraging the shiny thing of AI. Yes. What's even greater is we're breathing life into things that have a tendency to be, hey, let me check the dashboard this month. Okay, great. I'll check back next month. But it's like, how do you bring new news?
Yeah. And like something will pop up, a piece of research, a casual conversation you have with someone, and you might go, oh, that would be a really interesting way to look into this or that. And then you can just go off and do it, and you can come back. And speed to market's obviously a pretty big thing these days.
A very big thing, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so any final words that you wanted to share today, Kendra, before we close?
All I would say is, first, thank you, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share. The other thing is, it is a super exciting time to be a market researcher. It's great to be able to share just a snippet of what we're doing at LinkedIn. I think it will be even greater to be able to hear back from others into how they're experimenting. That's a piece that I didn't really talk about. We have the value of being a part of a broader organization of Microsoft. So we find ourselves often partnering and sharing, like, here's what we're doing. What are you doing? What's on the roadmap? I think there's also value to extending that even further from a general moving our field of work forward in being able to do some of this exchange. So I look forward to, continued share outs on your podcast, as well as, more generally in the industry on how we really move our field forward.
Yes, that sounds really, really great. So thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing your wisdom on the show today, Kendra. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience would have found it quite fascinating as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. And for those that have listened in today, if you have liked what you've heard, feel free to subscribe to our podcast. share it with others, or even leave a review. You're welcome to reach out to Kendra as well and have a chat about some of the things that she's been doing as well, if you want to implement the brand that density that we've been talking about today. Until next time, thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.